Coffee. There will be a day when I can get my day started and do well without a cup of coffee.
No, it wouldn't be as fun.
No, it's funny I say that there will be a day, but that doesn't sound like a very good day.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there actually will be. So
I think about dropping off a coffee from time to time, but
then you think, why?
it's a joy.
Well, I mean, we were just talking about Christmas carbs.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about that for a minute. But yeah, that's the thing with coffee is, so I drink it black. And I think, if the caffeine itself were unhealthy, if I knew that this was really bad drinking black coffee, then maybe I say, so I need to really give that up.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, if it's half, my grandmother on my wife's side,
Yeah.
when I first went down and met them in South Carolina, she was a good old South Carolina gal, and she first time I made a cup of coffee around her. This was years ago when I used to make my coffee differently. I didn't drink it black. She said, "What are you making, a milkshake?" I thought that was pretty funny because I used to just and that's very different. But we were talking about Christmas and how, oh my goodness, and how well we were doing.
Yeah.
Prior to the Christmas. I mean,
Yeah.
even through Thanksgiving, I think I did okay through Thanksgiving. And then then we had a wedding coming up. And so I thought, okay, Toby, kind of rein it in and, make sure you're not eating trash all the time.
Yeah.
And then Christmas pops up and you think, what's really bad is in the shop here, because people want to do something special for people.
Yeah.
And what we have made that is, I'm going to bring you sugar.
Yeah.
I mean, just sugar in chocolate, sugar in cookies, sugar in just anything with sugar says, I care about you.
Yeah.
And how that happened, I mean, it had to be the big sugar companies that some grand conspiracy. Hey, we're going to make holidays about everybody eating as much sugar as possible.
It's just so addictive, and again, you can go down that whole rabbit trail as well, but you want to encourage people and kind of bless people with something nice and good, but it
and
is
90%
addictive.
of that. Yeah.
It's addictive.
When you think about what to give somebody, what do you think?
Yeah.
I'm going to give them something, cookies,
homemade
cake.
bread, cookies, whatever.
Bread, homemade bread, I don't think is, that could never be
Sweet
unhealthy.
bread. That's what.
Sweet bread either. Anything with bread, for me, can't be unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, so now.
Your truth.
Yeah, that's right. So no wonder we have taken the opportunity to do New Year's resolutions right after Christmas, because that is, you're thinking, oh my goodness, we've come off of this binge.
Yeah. Well, you look at all the stores, Sam's Club, Costco, other places, they're putting in all the exercise equipment.
Right.
Everything's coming in. I noticed that even towards the end, as you're getting closer to Christmas, they're putting in, all these exercise things.
But for them, it's not because, it's not because they're worried about the health of mankind.
No.
For them, it's obviously because they know that that's what our brains do. We finally hit this wall where it's like, oh my goodness, what did I just do for the past 2 months? Anything and everything that came into my sphere of my radius where my arms, I just shoved it in my mouth. Just shoved it in my mouth and gave myself an excuse because it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas.
And I think it's kind of okay, to have festive celebrations, but I think you have to know when to put the lid on it.
What do you think about this? It's interesting. Brandy and I did, and this was not, we're going to talk about Christmas, but this is a big part of Christmas. Unfortunately has become, is that this just binging. What do you think about, Brandy and I did one time, it was called, it was early in our marriage. We wanted to get healthy. And so we did this, it was a book called Fit for Life. And it was really good, actually. It was talking about just how you eat. But the one thing that it did was talk about the 1/7, the day of rest. And that was a really interesting thought. And we've never talked about that, the seventh day, the day of rest. And what it did was the book basically highlighted this way of living where you're really disciplined and make sure that you kind of keep things within really strict boundaries, or at least boundaries that make sense for you to live a healthy life for 6 days. And on the seventh day, you don't worry about it. And the truth is, by the time you get to that seventh day, and this is not where we're planning to go with this, but by the time you get to that seventh day, you're kind of created this mentality for 6 days of being disciplined. And so what happens is you don't veer off course that much, a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's a biblical concept, by the way.
Yeah.
The year of letting the ground lay fallow and things like that.
Yeah. No, I think the one thing too, I think it's psychological in that, I can do this for 6 days.
Yeah.
But if you don't have an end, like forever, it kind of gets overwhelming. But if you...
What about rest? How well do you do with that?
Not well.
I mean, like if we're to follow the biblical concept of 1/7.
Yeah. Yeah, no, not well.
It's not Sunday for you, obviously.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be Sunday.
Well, yeah, I mean, I probably convinced myself that I take blocks of it that maybe equal a day or something through the week, but I probably should be more disciplined about an actual day. I would say like yesterday, when everything's closed and we were home all day long, didn't leave at all. It was really nice. It's just really nice to be at home and be focused on your family and other things.
Yeah.
And so,
did you guys do matching pajamas?
No.
We did it for the first year, I think. Brandy went and got us a bunch of matching pajamas. We took pictures in front of the tree. That was kind of fun. It's a thing.
Yeah, that's neat. No, we didn't. But it was fun. We had a good day. Kids enjoyed it. And we enjoyed it. We just enjoy having that time together. We do a breakfast.
So what's your routine? What's your schedule? I mean, like for us, we get up early. Early has become a different definition. But once we get up, then we open stockings and then we start cooking breakfast and then we do presents. Is that?
Yeah, that's kind of like how we do it. I'm normally the first one up, and so once a year, just once a year, I'll make homemade cinnamon rolls for the family. And so that takes about 3 hours or so by the time from start to finish.
Wow.
And so I'm normally up Christmas morning pretty early getting that going. And the kids will trickle down and they open their stocking. We don't do that necessarily all together.
Okay.
But they'll open their stockings as they come down.
Yeah.
And then when Nicole gets up, we'll get breakfast going, the whole breakfast going.
Yeah. Breakfast is a pretty big deal.
Everything. Yeah. I mean, it's casseroles and stuff like that. It's not major, but easy, good food. Well, easy,
good tasting, food. Good tasting food. We added a member to our family this year, and so it was because Ben and Liz are they're in our home just for the next week and a half until they head out to India for a month. But we added a member to our family, and when we talked about what Christmas breakfast was. One of the things we talked about, I mean, because it's always grapefruit. I mean, there's certain things especially Christmas is even a little bit more defined than Thanksgiving for us. Yeah. Huh. Is there has to be orange juice. We don't really drink orange juice except for Christmas morning. Yeah. It has to be grapefruit. We do ruby red grapefruit. There has to be eggs and bacon and cinnamon rolls. And she's like, well, what's cinnamon rolls? And we're like, well, you do I guess the grands or whatever. You shove them all together.
Oh, yeah, okay.
No, she wasn't having that. She's like, okay, I'll make cinnamon rolls. I was like, okay. I gave her a hard time because I'm like, those are good. Those cinnamon rolls are good. Oh my goodness, this girl, good grief, can she bake? She's up in the morning and she's rolling. And she makes the flour and has it makes the dough and has it rising, and then she's rolling it out and she's rolling up the cinnamon inside and then she's cutting it and making this cream cheese. Everything from scratch. From scratch. Yeah. And I had to admit that was much better. There's still some in our fridge, I think.
That's why we only do it once a year for us.
I know.
It takes a lot of time, but they're really, really good. They don't last very long.
What did you grow up doing the whole Santa thing when you were a kid?
My parents told us about Santa, or pretended with Santa. I believed it when I was growing up. I didn't suspect that I was being told a fable.
It's funny. I had one time I heard a pastor compare this this myth of Santa and say the danger can be, and I don't know how much there. I'm a skeptic with a lot of things, but there could be some truth to this. He said the myth of Santa then can create this cynicism in children, or at least skepticism, that when you say, oh, Santa really knows everything, and he knows when you're bad, and he knows when you're good, and you better, all these things we sing to them, and all the legends and the myths, the mythology. And then we say one day, or at the same time we're saying, God is real, and Jesus is real, and he knows everything about you. He knows you in and out. He knows your heart. He knows your intentions. And then one day they learn Santa ain't real.
Yeah.
And you think, what does that do for their perception? Yeah.
That's when
you think there's anything to that?
Yeah. Well, when Nicole and I started having kids, like I said, my parents grew up telling us about Santa, and we believed it. But we did not feel like we wanted to go take that approach with our kids. Because, we wanted them, for that exact reason, we wanted them to know that what we're telling you is the truth.
Yep.
And, we're not, if it's make-believe, we'll tell you it's make-believe or whatever. And so with the oldest ones, we were pretty strict. Like we didn't have anything Santa in the house or anything like that. Like we kind of kept it pretty tight. But as we've kind of gone on, we've basically said, Santa's a made up story. Sure. There was a real.
It's like we don't keep Easter bunnies out of our house.
Right. Yeah. And, we've loosened it up, but not to the sense of actually believing.
Right.
But, if they want to make Santa cookies or something like that, it's fine.
I'm just hoping there's no adults listening to this that are going to say, wait, Santa's not real?
That might be.
I think there's I think there could be some danger in that. But,
well, I want my children to know that as much as I can, with everything that I tell them, I want to speak truth to them.
Yeah.
Tell them what is true. And if they ask me directly, no matter what their age, are you telling me the truth? I want them to know, yes, I'm telling you the truth. You don't have to suspicion it. But I guess you could also say, again, I grew up, my parents, told us about Santa and Santa coming and all that. And I mean, I think I have a fairly, solid faith.
But even you think about even the whole myth, and he goes around the world in one night, shoving presents under the tree, coming down in the chimney. If you don't have a chimney, he finds other way. And you think even the way, all that's like this supernatural, miraculous kind of omnipotent, omniscient,
he's got all
omnipresent almost. Yeah. It's interesting, the parallels between the myth of Santa and God.
Yeah. So, but I don't, again, I'm going to err on the side of our kids need to know we're telling them the truth, versus, creating this kind of fairy tale childhood experience for them. I think they need to know that we are speaking truth to them. We're going to keep the focus of the season on what it needs to be, because really, again, I don't want to necessarily throw Santa under the sleigh.
Nice. I like what you did there.
But if you focus so much on that, that becomes the story of Christmas is getting, what can I get? What can I get? Whereas the story of Christ is the exact opposite of that. Yeah. What can I sacrificially give?
Yeah, and I was thinking as I was shopping the other day, doing some last minute shopping, it was funny because we work in retail, obviously, somewhat. I mean, my shop it touches retail significantly, but it's not all retail. It was the day before Christmas Eve, so it was the 23rd was the big shopping day. It wasn't planned. It wasn't. I mean, you just saw it when you went out. I went out on the 23rd, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's getting a little crazy out here. And I thought, as I was sitting there thinking about what we've made Christmas, and I love gift giving, and I think gifts are great. And Brandon and I even had a little crisis of conscience as we're wrapping presents. We're sitting there across from each other, and she's kind of in a little bit of a, sorry, I'll get back to the point in a minute, but she's in a little bit of a slump. And I'm like, what's happening? She's like, I feel like we overdid it. And I love gift giving, but when you're out on that big shopping day, the one thing I would say is that I was asking myself, is this a lot of peace, love, and joy happening here? Yeah. And I thought if Christmas, because we sing about it, peace, joy, and love, those kinds of things, they come into, into most of the carols and the traditional songs, and I think I didn't see a whole lot of peace. And so what we've made of it, and it's a little cliche to talk about, the commercialism and consumerism of Christmas, and I don't want to be cliche, but it's definitely peace, joy, and love don't seem to be this natural thing that just happens at Christmas.
Yeah.
I don't know, do you see that when you go out? I mean, hopefully it does at home. But
I was out on Monday as well, and it was just got kind of nutty. With so much traffic. I guess people are just trying to get last minute stuff done and whatever. One, I think, that many people celebrating Christmas, how many bring in the real meaning of Christmas. I hope it will be a majority of those who are out,
right,
who are celebrating. I mean, you don't have any way of knowing that, but you would hope that there at least be some semblance of this is what Christmas at least means, even if they're not making the explicit connection to Christ. Christmas is about sacrifice, or is about giving and loving. You would hope that would at least be. I mean, my hope would be that they would make the explicit, focus on the Lord Jesus. But you hope that at least the general theme carries through. I think in some ways it does. But it seems like there's a lot of Marthas around,
right,
trying to make everything just right, just perfect.
That's me. I am so Martha.
Yeah.
If people that don't know that story, obviously Jesus had to kind of say to Martha, "Whoa, calm down, Martha," because Martha's getting on Mary for just about a lot of sitting things there and like in awe of Jesus, kind of at the moment before he's going to, be crucified, and Martha's busy, and Jesus has to say, "Martha, Mary chose the greater thing here."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally Martha. So as the presents are being, the wrapping paper. That's the joke. It almost doesn't hit the ground. It's almost like Toby goes, and
you save the bows.
No, I don't say. No, I just get rid of it all. I want to get it off the floor. So it was almost a joke yesterday. As the wrapping paper hits the floor, they just know I'll just throw it on the floor because Dad, I actually kind of enjoy it. That's my thing. And so I'm the Martha. I'm the one. So yeah. Jesus being the same. We were sitting around the table at breakfast, and I said, as we were praying over breakfast, I had this realization, and I think I'll probably call this as a little bit of a teaser. Call this episode "Jesus Wasn't Born on Christmas," and I don't mean Jesus wasn't born on Christmas, like that we don't know the day. Jesus wasn't born in the sense that sometimes we think. Jesus' life didn't begin because he is the omnipotent God and the omnipresent and omniscient and forever. He is the I am that always was. Yeah. And so I think it's funny because we think about Jesus being born as the beginning of Jesus, which is he was just incarnated. He took on even that process itself. And it's so if you've seen a birth, if you've been in the room when your wife has given birth, which I have, it's this really magnificent, unbelievably spectacular, miraculous, and messy process. Yeah. And you think the God of creation, because John confirms in John 1 that he was there from the beginning. He always was. Jesus, the Son, always was. He was always there. Nothing was created without him. So that God the Son, Jesus, took on human flesh. And we say that, and we say it kind of lightly, took on human flesh, and we think, that must be, and I was even thinking about what was that day in history. That was the day in history when God took on human flesh. And I think that we sometimes don't put enough emphasis on that.
Yeah, I feel like the Lord kind of pressed a few things home to me over this Christmas season, and one is kind of what you're talking about, and I like the word that a lot of theologians use, which is God condescended himself. And because when you think about that term or about that word, like what it means, God came down, God came low, he made himself low, of a lower estate, which is just a pretty amazing picture of what God has done for us. And you're right, John says it, Paul says it in Colossians, Jesus is the creator. He existed. He has existed for all of eternity. And he was there in the beginning. Genesis also affirms that, which is, for our benefit. And I think The other thing that the Lord has pressed home over this Christmas season is, when Adam and Eve were separated from God in the garden, and they were cast out from the garden. God communicated with them and other things, but there wasn't that communion in proximity,
right?
And so the Jesus coming in the flesh in the manger, that's God entering back into the human condition, the human state, which is a pretty amazing thing when we think about it. And I think for God to put together this miraculous, awe-inspiring plan for our salvation, but not only for our salvation, but so that we could know Him.
Yeah,
is a pretty amazing. We talk about Christmas gifts and other things. What an amazing gift that we've been given.
Yeah,
to be able to know the God who has existed for all time, who has created us, who has given of Himself for us, and is making a place for us for eternity.
Yeah. It's sometimes Israel has been in the news since I was a child because it's been in the news for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And this focus on Israel is always a little bit confounding to people. Like, why? Why this little bitty country in the middle of nowhere? Why? It's and the reason is just because God made it that way. God wanted that to be the center of attention in this world, in this present world. And so you could say, is there any other holiday or any other day in humanity or in our culture that has the significance of Christmas Day? And you think, and why? It's what happened? Because if you look at it in a secular sense, in a non-spiritual sense, a man was born. A man that lived a life that was didn't even make, and so again, from secular sense, didn't even make an impact on the world until he was 30 and started his ministry. Maybe then, so for 30 years didn't make an impact on the world. And then for 3 years, with a ragtag bunch of guys, things started to happen around him in a way that people took notice, and miracles and followers, but then he was accused and kind of brought to this place where he was sentenced, executed, and then there was some story about him rising from the dead, a bunch of people seeing him, and then he ascended. And you think, okay, take that story, and you think, there's a lot of people throughout history that we could make a better story and say, that's someone we really need to celebrate, and there should be a holiday. But there's something there that the natural eyes don't see, obviously. The natural eyes don't see that, and just like Israel. Why are we so focused on Israel? Because God wanted us to.
This little piece of land.
Yeah.
Why is the whole world focused on this little piece of land?
Yeah.
At the edge of the Mediterranean.
I heard you talking on the phone. You were saying something about Israel, and someone was asking, well, how are things over there?
Yeah.
And you said, your brother-in-law spends a lot of time over there. And you said, well, it's kind of normal. They're just kind of living life normally. And I was thinking the reason why is because since your very existence, since your very birth of a nation, the rest of the world has pretty much wanted you dead. Yeah. And everyone has tried to destroy you. That's just the way you function. Yeah. You're just functioning in a way that everyone's trying to destroy you. You get an ally here and there every once in a while, but for the most part, you're trying to be destroyed for the past, for thousands of years. Yeah. And so back to the, this, why the focus on Israel? Because God wanted it that way. Why the focus on this birth, this particular, because that's something happened that the natural eyes don't see here. Yeah. Something happened that day that if we just look at it with historical eyes, with a historical lens, like what's the significance of that man? What did he do? And you think, okay, then what even happened after his birth, life, ministry, death, and resurrection and ascension? What happened afterwards is the whole world kind of just changed. Everything kind of shifted and changed. And historians, probably for the most part can't make a very good sense of that.
Yeah.
But that's because we look at it through secular eyes.
Yeah, the whole means in which Jesus entered into the world was for our benefit. You know, when you think about even, I love the Christmas story because it's just, you know, it is a story of those who are marginalized being placed in the center by God Himself.
Yeah.
You know, you think of the shepherds, and you know, of all the people that it could have been announced in that kind of way. I mean, why not announce to Herod that way? With a heavenly choir, this grand vision, you know, would that have turned his heart? Maybe, I don't know. But, you know, I would think if I were in God's shoes, I would think, yeah, this is, you know, announce it to the leader, let him see the heavenly choir, let the angel speak directly to him. And, but that's not how God did it. He took the lowliest of the low, you know, the shepherd. Testimony was not admissible in court.
That's what I was going to say. People that don't know the significance of shepherds or the insignificance of shepherds.
So for them to have seen a heavenly choir and to go and tell all the people are like, whatever, you know, you're known to be liars, you're known to be shady, you're known to be this, that, or the other. They
didn't even live in civil society.
Yeah. They were on the outskirts and whatever, you know, but the joy that they had, that God had seen what was outcast and had God had brought that near to him, and they become, for now, all of history since that time, those who the culture said you can't testify, they continue to testify.
They become the first evangelists.
They do, and it's a, you know, it's just a powerful story. And then again, I really like, you know, Anna and Simeon in the temple. You know, particularly in our culture where everyone wants to look young, be young, you know, act young. But Anna and Simeon in the temple who just been patiently waiting, crying out to God, asking, and he walks in and they see him, and it's just this miraculous power of God that moves upon Simeon first and then Anna, and it's a confirmation of what God has spoken to them. I mean, it's just a really beautiful picture, and I think it reminds us the song that is sung a lot at Christmas time. It's kind of maybe foreboding in some ways, like, "Oh, come, Emmanuel, and rescue captive Israel." You know, that whole song, like, of this waiting and longing, and finally, you know, and you see that in Anna and Simeon, this patient waiting over periods of time, and at Christmas, you know,
and those, for people who are not familiar with it, and I don't know how many people we would have listen to this that don't know the story, is they were there in the temple when Jesus was brought for on the 8th day. And they had been waiting the Messiah, the promised one that would come, and they recognized Jesus as that when Mary and Joseph brought him.
You can, Luke 1 and 2 is a great place to read that story, or Charlie Brown Christmas. Linus recites a good part of Luke 2.
That's funny.
And so you could hear it there too. But
what's the best Christmas movie? Sorry, we're right in the middle of a profound conversation about God's redemptive work. What's the best Christmas movie? It's funny because I watched Elf the other night because my brother, my little guy, Thomas, my youngest, he's like, "Hey, we got to watch Elf. And I'm like, I'm kind of done with Elf. And it's funny, he put Elf on, and he hears me laughing, like, because every line in that movie is just hysterical. And he hears me laughing. He's like, "Dad, I thought you were done with that." I was like, "Okay, I know. I'm getting into the Christmas spirit. It's just funny. It's just funny."
Yeah.
Is there a Christmas movie then? We'll get back to the profound stuff in a minute, but
we do some of the old ones. It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah, got to do that one. We do that one Christmas Eve. Yep.
We do this year. We watch. I don't know if you ever watch Holiday Inn. It's not as popular. It's the
No, someone told us we had to watch that.
It's the precursor to White Christmas.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where White Christmas, the song, was originally written for that movie.
Okay,
in 1941.
Yeah. I've heard that's a good old movie.
It's pretty good.
When you watch Miracle on 34th Street, do you ever watch that?
Yeah.
The old one or the new one? Which one do you newer? When I say new, I mean the one from like the 90s versus the one from the 40s.
Yeah, we've most often watched the newer one than the old one.
Yeah, I like the old one too.
But It's a Wonderful Life is kind of a staple classic for a lot of people. We do Elf, so but.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally took us off track.
Grinch.
Yeah, the Grinch. You got it. Yeah. It's funny because most of the stories, if you think about, if you've never seen The Man Who Invented Christmas, that's a really cool story.
Yeah, I'm not seeing
It is the story of Dickens, Charles Dickens, and I don't know how much historical truth there is to this, to the way that they recount it, but Dickens has had a real this one. The Oliver Twist comes out, and he's this renowned author, and everyone's celebrating him, and he does this tour across America and everything, and then he has a couple flops after that. I can't remember which books they were, and the pressure's on. He's got to do something and do it quick because he's become this just world famous author, and now he's not. People are seeing stuff that's coming, and it's the creation of the Christmas Carol, and how that kind of came to be. And it's a really interesting story.
Yeah,
but even the Christmas Carol, that the work of redemption, you see, that is interesting. That is the common theme throughout most popular Christmas movies.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even Elf. Elf is just his. I mean, it's his dad. His dad is this redemptive work of someone who is just this bah humbug kind of, and he comes to this place where his heart is turned, and the Grinch, Scrooge, isn't it interesting that tends to be like the turning of the heart, that's almost
that's the story.
That's the story in every Christmas movie. Yeah, seemingly
is this transformation of some individual or something. I mean, you see it time and time again.
Yeah,
and in all of those that you watch, and there's so many out now, but Christmas Carol, is interesting because it's actually it's kind of dark in some ways.
It's very dark.
I mean, you've got if you animated versions or other that are fine, but
no, one of them's really dark. The Jim Carrey one's very, very
really,
it is.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one, but we watched the Muppets.
Yeah, well, the Muppets isn't scary. The Jim Carrey one, the animated Jim Carrey one, is scary.
Really,
it is.
Okay,
it is.
Yeah, so you think even at Christmas, something like that is kind of, but particularly with the last visitation that Scrooge has.
Yeah.
It kind of puts you face to face with your mortality.
Yeah, and I think, what happened on that day, the actual day. It's interesting when we think about Christmas, we think about Christmas as a concept, as an abstract. But to think about it as an actual day is kind of hard for our brains to kind of narrow it down and nail it down. And it's funny because I even drew it. You think about, I was just kind of trying to picture it, like what happened on that day. What did that day mean in the grand scheme of history, if you were to kind of put it that way? Is that, like you said, there's the fall of man in the beginning that separates man from communion with God. God kind of returns to the heavens and doesn't reside with man, And then this trajectory then for throughout history of God in the heavens, and he'll send messages and messengers, and even Jesus himself shows up in these little pictures throughout the Old Testament, and like in these times where the angel of the Lord appears. The angel of the Lord appears and he speaks, and he wrestles with Jacob or whatever. All these times where the angel of the Lord, you think, okay, that's little glimpses of Jesus. Yeah. But it's almost like this trajectory of God and man existing throughout history on our timeline anyway. Almost, separated, but kind of connected in the law and all kinds of different things. And then all of a sudden, one day, God drops from heaven and communes with mankind again in flesh. And that's something new, actually. And I think, to think about that day, what actually happened on that day, it kind of makes your head want to explode, to think of the significance of that the Creator God came to dwell among men. And then if you think about doing it in a baby, it's such a strange and awkward way for the Creator of the universe to commune with man. Yeah. What kind of sense do you make of that? I mean,
I think one primarily is for him to enter into our condition.
Yeah.
Bible says he was tempted in all points like we are, yet without sin. Not that God needed to be tempted to like prove, hey, I can do this or whatever. That's certainly not the reason why. Yeah. But it is a testimony to us that God has persevered through faithfulness and has given us of his Spirit to help us persevere in order to be faithful as well.
That's real communion too. You think about that. You think about how man and wife, or even brothers, or like men who become communion, really being with each other. You think that accomplished that kind of communion that we can kind of relate to. We can relate to him as a man.
Yes. And I think it's hard without the entrance of Jesus into the world. It's hard to relate to God in a tangible way.
Yeah, agreed.
It's very abstract, and
that's why you see the high places throughout history in the Old Testament. They always went up to the high places to kind of try to make sense of.
Yeah, and you can't.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
No. You can't until the full revelation of Jesus. That's when it actually begins to make sense, is in the full revelation of Jesus. I mean, everything else up until that point is type and foreshadow and anticipation and a part and whatever. And again, there's still a sense of that even now with some of the things that are yet future to come.
Yeah.
But in terms of God revealing himself in Christ, everything else up until that point was pointing to Jesus. And then you have this boom, kind of revelation of who he is and who he was. And we're able to look back, and see that pretty clearly through all the traditions and everything else. But I think, you have to have a little bit of empathy for those who were living in that time and in that time period, trying to see through it to Christ, as was probably a little more difficult than us having the benefit of the historical Christ looking back.
Yeah.
And let's say, oh, this is what the sacrifices meant. This is what, it meant for Jesus to come into the earth. This is what why there had to be a blood sacrifice. This, we can see all these things that we be hard to see, harder, I think, my perception would be, it's harder for those prior to Christ to perceive it, though they did.
It's interesting, even history kind of recognized, until recently, there's the new timelines, the BCE and A, whatever they are, instead of Ante Domini, which was after Jesus. So it was BC and AD, and then they've changed it recently. But even history recognizes the fact that day had significance. That life, one life of one carpenter's son, and the son of a virgin, had enough significance that it changed history. And I think that's really interesting. That again, Israel becoming the focus of the whole world. And people are like, why are we so focused on Israel?
No.
Like, we can't even help it. We just focused on Israel. We're like, why focus on that day? Why is that day? Why is that person so significant? Because that's the way God made it. Yeah. He made it significant.
Well, and yes, he made it to be that way. And as he made it to be that way, he established a covenant with a man named Abraham.
Yeah.
And Jesus is part of the fulfillment of that covenant. When God even tells Abraham, I'm going to bless all the nations through you.
Yeah.
Jesus enters into the world, and he's part of that blessing unto all the nations who come to know him.
Yeah.
I think the geography, with all of the battling back and forth over the land of Israel, as believers, we have to remember God gave that piece of geography to them. That's why it's important for us to perceive this is a covenant of the Lord, and not that we have to try to make that covenant happen by advocating for Israel in a certain way.
Right,
because there is a lot of immorality in the Jewish people, and we ought not, as with many cultures and things, but we ought not affirm that. But we also ought to want to see God's plan fulfilled. Everywhere where Abraham's foot tread, God said, I'm promising you that land. And so we ought to advocate for that, pray for that, pray for, those things to come to pass.
One of the conversations that we went to my kids know, my kids know that by 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, I'm dead. I'm done. If I'm not in bed by 10, I'm starting to fade fast.
Yeah.
But we decided to go to a midnight mass.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to decide So we went to an Anglican church. It's very different than what I'm used to. It was interesting to me what it actually resembled. And the conversation in the car was the "Mary, Did You Know" song. And one of my sons was like, well, of course she knew. She knew because the angel had told her. And I was thinking, but I thought, there's indications throughout, even, obviously as Jesus started his ministry and Mary and her other sons, Jesus' brothers, are like, you want to kind of tone it down a little bit? Even she knew she was a virgin when she became pregnant. She knew that she was visited by an angel. She knew all these things, and she knew this was the Messiah. It was told to her. But you got to think, even that, like, there's times where she didn't really know, like that she didn't quite have the whole picture and couldn't quite understand how profound this was.
Yeah.
I mean, even if she accepted that it was the Messiah, even like what the Messiah would actually do for mankind. I know there was legends and historical prophecies and things about what the Messiah was, the redemption of Israel. But even what that was, that all mankind, past, present, and future, would be redeemed to God through this one baby that she was bearing. And you think, did she know that? Did she quite have a handle on that? And I think, where he was like, of course she knew. And I'm thinking, I don't think you can.
So much of what happened with her, particularly the scripture says, and she treasured these things or pondered these things,
right?
Thought about these things.
She was probably always thinking, oh, wow.
She was kind of thinking through. So I don't,
especially for 30 years. You think 30 years went by, and what was Jesus' life like? We know at 12 he was in the temple, and he obviously recognized the temple as the house of his father, and but then from 12 to 30, what was Mary seeing in him?
Yeah, you wonder. You don't have any real indication of that. I mean, I think there's some traditions that point to those things, but that's not generally accepted as equivalent to the biblical canon. We could talk about all those theological things. I was going to go back.
So I started with we went to a mass at an Anglican church. The music was beautiful. It was like the old hymns, and they sung it in these parts that actually I'd never even heard. Like the way they harmonize is very different in these old hymn books. The hymn books, it's not like the harmony, the 4-part harmony or whatever that I, growing up in the hymn books that we used, it was even different. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and the hymns were beautiful and based directly in scripture. And then it went through, obviously, it's just very different. So this is just me kind of as an outsider coming in and being part of this mass. It reminded me, or it looked like a lot of Old Testament stuff. The waving the incense, burning incense. And one of my sons got sick because the incense apparently was myrrh. It was myrrh, and they do this on Christmas Eve. Yeah, and it was very it was thick, like this smoke, and I know all that has significance and obviously symbolism and things like that. And it was really interesting, but it was just very different for me. That whole thing, and I just thought there's so many different ways that people celebrate Jesus, but as long as it's done with clean hands and a pure heart, right, and it's done in the way that reflects scriptural truth, it's just, but it all points back to the same person, and not to say all roads lead to heaven. That is not all roads lead to God, or though it doesn't matter how you worship God, it all is pointing to the same God. It is important when I say it has to reflect scriptural truth. I didn't, in all honesty, I'll tell you, I didn't know what to make of that. The other night, it was a little, it was, I wouldn't say off-putting for me, but it was awkward. It was very awkward. The bowing and the fanfare, not the fanfare, the liturgy, it was it was awkward for me. And so I tried to take it, and I don't know if you've been to those services. I'm sure you have.
So I think, again, there's a lot of theological considerations behind those, behind how you approach and your perception of, from really out of the Reformation, sola scriptura, or
right.
Scripture alone, as opposed to Scripture and church tradition. And,
right.
You can have all of those kind of conversations. And I would say, to your thought on, kind of having different expressions but worshiping the same Jesus, and I agree with that to an extent, probably.
Yeah.
I think whether it's high church, which, that would, I don't want that to be a pejorative or derogatory.
Sure.
But generally that's considered like a high church
right.
Approach.
Steeped in very tradition and very structure.
Yeah.
Very structured.
Yeah. As opposed to what would be, kind of a your non-denominational, more loose or whatever. And you say, well, we should probably meet in the middle. Sometimes the middle's not the place you want to be either,
right.
But what I do
get boring there.
Yeah. what I do think is important for us to think about is, and what I try to go back to in my own life is, where are my affections?
Yeah.
Am I consoled by the fact that I've gone through the church ritual? Does that console me that I have made peace with God, or that I am at peace with God? Does the church ritual do that? Or is it because the affections of my heart are pointed towards Christ? I long after him. I long to be like him. I want to serve him with everything that is within me. Because I think at times we can tend to, again, no matter where you fall on a spectrum of how you desire to worship, or how you feel the Lord is leading you to worship, or how you think Scripture talks about worship, I think you have to examine the intents and the aspirations of the heart. And if I'm walking through some things that are tradition, and I feel like, man, this is awesome because I'm laying my hand back to what people have been doing for thousands of years and carrying it through, and I feel comforted by that fact. But your heart's not turned towards the Lord. You're not pursuing Christ. You're not longing after him. I think that's a big challenge. You're only deceiving yourself. Whereas the same thing, on the other side, Jesus talked about that, didn't we? Prophesy, cast out demons. When you talk about the power of God, and we long for the power of God, you can lay hold of those things in some ways as well, and use those to comfort yourself. Well, I'll give a word of prophecy, or I spoke in tongues,
right.
or I did this. So God's certainly pleased with me.
Right.
And I think having a sense of self-examination, which is what I think Paul calls us to, where we look at the intent of the heart, our affections, what do they lie upon? I also think the other thing that we have to perceive is Jesus came lowly.
Yeah.
He came lowly. He came into the earth, laying on a rock with some hay on it.
Yeah.
This was the way he chose to enter in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the traditions that have come from man are more akin to comforting our own hearts, despite our own iniquities and sin. It's like when Jesus was confronting, and again, I want to be careful. I'm not saying that these traditions are Pharisaical or other things, but I'm saying it's the same thing. The Pharisees
the traditions
started out,
it's their hearts that become Pharisaical.
Yeah. The Pharisees started out as a reform movement. They wanted the heart of God, and yet they had become so consumed with the traditions of men. And Jesus is just like, can't you see? Can't you tell? Don't you know? I'm staring you right in the face, and you don't see me.
As you're saying that, it's one of the quotes of Jesus is, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of captures both. Like if you think about keeping the commandments throughout history, prior to this, this condescension of God to become man, it was keeping commandments, keeping commandments, keeping commandments, keeping commandments. And then there became this communion with when God became flesh. And the problem is it needs to be both, right? This love, this communion, this affection, and keeping commandments. And what happened was the Pharisees almost kind of just glanced right over and didn't understand that God became flesh. And there was this, all the promises, all the law, all these things throughout history became flesh. Yeah. It all became flesh. And it dwelt in a person. And they missed the person because they were just so focused on keeping the commandments.
That's what Jesus says.
Yeah.
All of these things point to me.
Right.
Everything that it points to me, and I'm here standing in your face, and staring you in the face, and you want the traditions over. He says that when he is talking about tithing, he tells the Pharisees who would say to their parents, "Oh, I can't take care of you. I can't help you because all the money and the resources that I have, I'm giving that. I'm having to help, essentially use that for the kingdom of God. And Jesus says, you will cut out and you will tithe on mint and cumin. You'll tithe on these things, but you neglect the weightier matters. That you're not concerned about the intentions and the thoughts of the heart. Again, I genuinely think that's what Christmas brings us to. If we really want to get down to the brass tacks of the situation, Christmas is God coming into the world and encountering man.
Yeah.
And what Jesus said, bringing a division. He's at that moment, he starts separating sheep from goats. And you see it in the Christmas story.
Yeah.
The shepherds are welcomed in.
Right.
The Pharisees the wise men are looking and they find him. Herod, who's against him, you immediately begin to see this cast of characters that are some on the righteous path, some on the unrighteous path.
Right. The self-promoters.
Yeah.
Herod and then the Pharisees later. Yeah. It's an interesting way to kind of bring it to a fine point, that, and you think about what happened in that moment, and how it really was this, the time where God, it's funny because we always think of things linear in a linear fashion. So my brain is linear, the timeline is linear, and so it's hard for me, even the way I wrote it, like even the way I drew it was this line of history, and boom, God condescends and Jesus is born. And you think, is there any way to do it in a circular, and you put it in the middle? It's because it's the middle. It's the middle of the story. It's the central point of the story. Which, if you put anything down through, and it's the point at which history rotates and revolves around it. The Christmas story is the center. That's the center of it says that from the foundation of the world. He was the lamb that was slain from the foundation of the world. This was something that was going to happen. The story of Jesus was going to be in the center from the beginning, and it will also be the central point at the end. And so, again, I'm doing this.
It's the way we learn. It's just our mindset.
I know.
It's not that Eastern. It's not the way the Eastern thought process happens.
Yeah.
But it definitely is what's enculturated into us. We see everything linear, and we can't. I don't know that we can unplug from that.
Yeah, and it's not too late. I was going to say that's the one thing too, is we also, because we are linear in the way we think, oh, Christmas is over,
yeah,
and now we're past it, and now it's New Year's. Like we get to this point where we're thinking, okay, the Christmas season is done because we opened all our presents and we ate all the food, right? And now it's on to the next thing. But that's this weird linear thing, and I think it's not too late to ponder, to discuss, even to I like to kind of at the dinner table when I pray at the dinner table when we're together as a family, kind of recenter at least my thoughts and help my family center their thoughts around really this poignant things that we need to be thinking. And so I think it's not too late to continue to talk about Christmas and the significance of it. Yeah. It never is. Christmas in July or whatever. It's always the right time to think about what that event meant.
So what do you think God's asking you to carry from this Christmas?
That's a good point. That's a good question. This Christmas was unique for us because it's really interesting. One of the things I love about marriage is that it doesn't subtract, it adds.
Yeah.
And I hope her family feels the same way. I really do. I hope Benjamin becomes this addition and not a subtraction of her from there. And so for me, this Christmas, that was the kind of the significant difference about this Christmas was adding that there's always room for one more around the table. It's not hard to make room for one more around the table. And I think that is a biblical concept. Yeah. Right. There's it's an old song. That's what it is. There's room at the cross for you. Isn't that an old song?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's, there's it's always Christmas. I mean, it's always, at least the story of Christmas is always relevant. It's not relevant on December 25th and that alone.
Yeah.
So, what about you?
Yeah. I think, one of the things that the Lord has reminded me of is what, some of what we've already talked about, which I think I need to kind of carry in my hat a little more, is him entering in a lowly fashion. He's not a God that's concerned about the pomp and fanfare that we can offer him, and that in our life and our pattern of living and other things. Accepting, I don't necessarily use the word less, but maybe what you mentioned with Martha and Mary, choosing the better thing. Figuring out and choosing the better thing, which is in the presence of Christ, and allowing other things to kind of manage themselves, because that is what the Lord tells us, to consider the lilies of the field, consider the sparrow. They don't toil nor spin, yet they're clothed in all this beauty, and their Father takes care of them. And some things I think we have to trust God to take care of while we're in the midst of his presence.
Yeah. I would say, to wrap it up, I learned or at least started to wrap my head around the word shalom one day, when we had a Jewish friend, a Messianic Jew, when I was a kid, that taught us about shalom. And it doesn't just mean hello, goodbye.
No.
It means, and it doesn't just mean peace. It means it's like completion. It's like this, there's something about the word shalom that just means completion, like completeness and joy and peace and love and all that kind of wrapped up into one. So that's how I would wrap it up and say shalom. So until next time. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks. Let's go. All right, let's go.